I was fired over a coffee stain on my brother-in-law's suit with exactly 7 minutes until our biggest investor meeting. I thought I had lost everything. But when I told the man in the lobby I had just been let go, he laughed. He asked if the CEO had just shot himself in the foot. I didn't realize the drive in my pocket could flip a company worth $2 billion and destroy my marriage. My name is Nora Whitfield, and until 7 minutes ago, I was the Director of Technical Operations for Northgate Dynamics. I am 34 years old, and I have spent the last 4 years of my life living inside the server rooms and code repositories of this building. To the casual observer, or perhaps to the junior analysts who sit in the bullpens on the lower floors, I was just another woman in a blazer moving briskly from one crisis to another. But to anyone who actually understood the valuation of this company, I was the architect. I built the Argent pipeline. It was not just a piece of software. It was the central nervous system of our entire logistics network. It was the reason we could integrate legacy shipping data with real-time tracking across 3 continents without crashing the database. It was the singular reason that Northgate Dynamics was currently being valued at $2 billion. Without the Argent pipeline, this company was just a warehouse with a fancy website. I knew that. The board knew that. But the man standing in front of me, unfortunately, did not seem to care. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind of day that feels heavy with humidity and expectation. The air conditioning on the executive floor was humming, a low-frequency drone that usually helped me think. But today it just felt like pressure building inside a sealed container. I was running late, not because I was disorganized, but because the quarterly budget meeting had run 40 minutes over schedule. I had sat there, tapping my pen against my notebook, watching the clock tick down while the new interim CEO rambled on about corporate synergy and brand identity. That CEO was Gavin Hale, my brother-in-law. Gavin had been appointed to the role exactly 5 days ago. It was a classic move by the Hale Family Trust. Put the charismatic eldest son in the big chair right before the public offering to make the leadership look stable. The problem was that Gavin knew as much about logistics technology as I knew about deep-sea fishing. He was a suit, he was a smile, he was a handshake, and right now, he was standing directly in my path. I was moving fast, clutching a paper cup of lukewarm coffee that I had bought from the cart on the corner. It was the cheap stuff, bitter and burnt, but I needed the caffeine. My heels clicked sharply against the polished marble floor. I checked my watch. I had exactly 7 minutes to get down to the lobby. Damien Crowe was waiting. Damien Crowe was the lead partner at the venture capital firm, holding the keys to our $2 billion future. He was not a man who waited. He was known for walking out of meetings if the coffee was cold or the handshake was weak. My job was to meet him, walk him through the technical due diligence, and prove that our system was robust enough to handle the capital injection. I had the presentation memorized. I had the data visualized in my head. I was ready. I rounded the corner near the executive elevators, my mind already rehearsing the opening lines of my pitch. I did not see Gavin until it was too late. He was pacing in the middle of the hallway, his back to me, barking into his phone. He was loud. Gavin was always loud. He liked to perform authority rather than exercise it. He turned suddenly, pivoting on his heel to gesture at some invisible audience, and stepped right into my trajectory. The collision was not graceful. It was a hard, jarring impact of bone and fabric. I gasped as the breath was knocked out of me. The paper cup in my hand buckled under the pressure. The plastic lid popped off with a treacherous little snap. I watched in slow motion as 16 ounces of hazelnut roast launched into the air. It seemed to hang there for a second, defying gravity, before splashing violently across the front of Gavin's bespoke charcoal gray suit. The liquid soaked instantly into the expensive Italian wool. It dripped down his lapel. It splattered onto his crisp white shirt. But that was not the worst part. In the collision, Gavin's hand had flailed out. His phone, the latest model that he had been showing off all week, slipped from his grip. It tumbled through the air, turning end over end, and slapped face down onto the unforgiving marble floor. Crack. The sound was sharp and sickening, like a bone snapping. Silence descended on the hallway. It was absolute. The junior assistants at the reception desk froze, their hands hovering over their keyboards. The VP of sales, who had been walking out of his office, stopped mid-stride. The only sound was the faint drip of coffee falling from Gavin's jacket to the floor. Gavin stood there, his arms held out from his sides, looking down at his chest. His face, usually flushed with the easy confidence of a man who has never had to worry about rent, went pale, and then an ugly, mottled red. He looked at the phone on the floor. He picked it up. The screen was a spiderweb of fractured glass. He looked at his suit, now ruined with a dark, spreading stain that smelled of burnt sugar. Then he looked at me. I saw the shift in his eyes. It was not just anger, it was opportunity. For 5 days, Gavin had been looking for a way to assert dominance over me. He hated that I was the one who understood the company better than he did. He hated that his younger brother, my husband Ethan, deferred to me on technical matters. He hated that the board asked for my opinion before they asked for his. "Look what you did," Gavin said. His voice was low, trembling with a rage that felt performative. He raised his voice, pitching it so it would carry down the corridor. "Look at what you just did." I took a breath, trying to slow my racing heart. "Gavin, I am so sorry. I was rushing to the elevator. It was an accident." "An accident?" He let out a harsh, incredulous laugh. He stepped closer to me, invading my personal space. I could smell his cologne, heavy and musk-based, mixing with the coffee. "You are running through the executive hallway like a chaotic teenager. You ruined a $3,000 suit. You destroyed my phone." "I will pay for it," I said quickly. I reached into my bag for a tissue, offering it to him, but he slapped my hand away. The tissue fluttered to the floor. "I will cover the dry cleaning and the phone replacement. Just send me the bill. But Gavin, please, I have to go. Damien Crowe is downstairs." I should not have said that. I saw the flash in his eyes. Mentioning the investor was a reminder that I had important work to do, work that mattered more than his suit. It was a reminder that I was essential. "You do not talk back to me," Gavin snarled. He was shouting now, fully committed to the scene he was creating. He wanted an audience, and he had one. Doors were opening down the hall. Heads were poking out. "This is exactly the problem with you. Nora, you are careless. You are reckless. You think because you wrote some code 5 years ago that you can walk around here destroying property and disrespecting leadership." "I am not disrespecting you," I said, keeping my voice steady, though my hands were shaking. "I am trying to do my job. The investor meeting is in 7 minutes. If I am not down there to explain the pipeline architecture, we risk the funding." "You are not going anywhere," Gavin said. He wiped a hand across his wet lapel and flicked the coffee onto the floor near my shoes. "You think you are indispensable? You think this company stops running because you aren't there to hold its hand? That is your arrogance speaking. You are sloppy. Nora, you are undisciplined, and frankly, I am tired of cleaning up your messes." I stared at him. The injustice of it burned in my throat. I had spent weekends sleeping under my desk to hit deadlines. I had missed my anniversary dinner 2 years in a row to patch critical server vulnerabilities. I had built the Argent pipeline brick by digital brick, while Gavin was busy playing golf and attending networking galas. "Gavin," I said, my voice hardening, "this is not the time. We have $2 billion on the line. Let me go downstairs. We can discuss your suit later." "We will not discuss it later," he said. He straightened up, puffing out his chest. He looked around the hallway, making sure everyone was watching. He was about to deliver his line. He wanted to look like the strong leader making a tough decision. He wanted to decapitate the technical leadership to show that he was the alpha. "You are insubordinate," he announced. "You just physically assaulted the CEO and destroyed company property due to gross negligence, and now you are refusing to take accountability." "It was coffee," I said, incredulous. "It was an accident." "It is a pattern," he yelled, "and I am ending it. You are fired, Nora." The words hung in the air, heavy and absurd. "What?" I whispered. "You heard me," Gavin said, his voice dropping to a smug, satisfied register. You are terminated. Effective immediately. Hand over your badge. You cannot be serious, I said. Gavin, the investor is in the lobby. I am the only one who can answer his questions about the data integration. If I do not walk into that room, he walks out. I will handle the investor, Gavin said dismissively, as if $2 billion were a minor detail. I do not need you to explain my company to anyone. I want you out of this building. He turned to the security guard who was standing by the elevator bank, looking uncomfortable. The guard, a man named Marcus, who I had greeted every morning for 3 years, looked down at his shoes. Marcus, Gavin barked. Escort Ms. Whitfield to the exit, immediately. She is not to return to her desk. She is not to touch a computer. Walk her out the front door. Mr. Hale, Marcus started, his voice hesitant. She has her things upstairs. I said get her out, Gavin screamed, his face turning that ugly red again. Now, or you can hand in your badge right after her. I looked at Gavin. I looked at the coffee stain on his chest, the jagged crack on his phone screen. I looked at the smug satisfaction on his face. He thought he had just won. He thought he had just crushed me. He thought that by stripping me of my title and humiliating me in front of the entire floor, he was securing his power. He had no idea what he had just done. I felt a strange sensation wash over me. It was not panic. It was not sorrow. It was a cold, sharp clarity. The noise of the office faded away. The humidity seemed to drop. I looked at Marcus, who was walking toward me with an apologetic expression. It is okay. Marcus, I said. My voice was calm, unnaturally calm. You do not need to grab me. I am leaving. Badge? Gavin demanded, holding out his hand. I reached for the lanyard around my neck, the plastic ID card that had been my identity for 4 years. The key to the kingdom. I unclipped it. I dropped it into Gavin's outstretched palm. Good luck with the meeting, Gavin, I said. He sneered at me. I do not need luck. I am the CEO. I turned my back on him. I did not look at the junior analysts gaping at me. I did not look at the empty office that held my personal belongings, my photos of Ethan, my framed degree. I walked straight to the elevator and pressed the down button. The doors opened instantly, as if fate were impatient. I stepped inside. As the doors slid shut, cutting off the sight of Gavin wiping coffee off his chest, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. It was a notification. Calendar event. Investor greeting. Lobby. Start time, now. I stared at the metal doors. I was fired. I was unemployed. I had been humiliated. But as the elevator began its smooth descent from the 34th floor, a thought occurred to me. I was supposed to meet Damien Crowe. I was supposed to sell him on the company. But I did not work for the company anymore. The elevator plummeted, and my stomach dropped with it. But my mind was racing. I had 7 minutes to get to the lobby. Well, now I had about 45 seconds. The doors chimed softly as they reached the ground floor. They opened to reveal the expansive, polished marble of the main lobby. It was bright, flooded with morning sunlight. And there, sitting on one of the leather sofas near the security turnstiles, was Damien Crowe. He was looking at his watch. I stepped out of the elevator. I had no badge. I had no job. But I still had the appointment. And I realized, with a sudden, dangerous thrill, that Gavin had made a tactical error. He had fired me before the meeting, not after. I smoothed my blazer, I took a deep breath, and I walked toward the man with the $2 billion. I walked across the lobby floor, and for the first time in 4 years. The sound of my heels on the marble did not feel like a march into battle. It felt like a departure. The distance from the elevator bank to the seating area was perhaps 50 feet, but in that short walk, the entire architecture of my life shifted. Upstairs, the air was likely still thick with Gavin's shouting and the smell of spilt hazelnut roast. Down here, everything was cool, sterilized, and silent. Damien Crowe watched me approach. He did not stand up immediately. He was sitting with one leg crossed over the other, inspecting a document on a tablet with the intensity of a diamond cutter looking for a flaw. He was younger than people expected, perhaps late 40s, but he had eyes that looked like they had seen empires rise and burn. He wore a navy suit that cost more than my car, and unlike Gavin, he wore it as if it were a second skin, not a costume. He checked his watch as I stopped in front of the low glass table. Then he looked up. His gaze was direct, unblinking, and entirely devoid of warmth. It was a calculating look, the kind that assessed value in milliseconds. "You are late, Ms. Whitfield," Damien said. His voice was a low baritone, smooth but edged with steel. 7 minutes late. My analyst told me the Argent pipeline was built on efficiency. I hope the architect does not lack the same quality. He stood up then, buttoning his jacket with a fluid motion. He expected an apology. He expected me to swipe a badge, lead him through the turnstiles, and start the dance. He expected the pitch. I stood there, my hands empty at my sides. I had no laptop. I had no access card. I had no job. The absurdity of it bubbled up in my chest, threatening to turn into hysterical laughter, but I clamped it down. I forced myself to remain absolute zero. "I am not late, Mr. Crow," I said. "I am finished." Damien paused. His hand stopped halfway to his pocket. He tilted his head slightly, like a bird of prey hearing a twig snap in the distance. "Finished?" he repeated. "Is the integration complete? I was told we were looking at a live beta test today." "The integration is running," I said, "but I cannot take you upstairs. I cannot show you the server room, and I certainly cannot walk you through the codebase." He frowned, a microscopic tightening of the skin around his eyes. "And why is that?" I looked him dead in the eye. I decided right then that I would not sugarcoat it. I would not use corporate euphemisms like parting ways or strategic realignment. "Because," I said, my voice steady and clear in the cavernous lobby, "I was fired 45 seconds ago." I waited for the shock. I waited for the awkward politeness, the quick retreat, the mumble of condolences before he called his driver. But Damien Crow did not flinch. He did not look embarrassed for me. Instead, a slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. It was not a smile of amusement. It was the smile of a man who just watched his opponent in a poker game accidentally show his hand. "Fired," he said, testing the word on his tongue. 45 seconds ago. Interesting timing." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times, his thumb moving with practiced speed, and then turned the device toward me. On the screen was a professional headshot of Gavin Hale. It was from the press release sent out last week. Gavin looking noble and visionary, staring off into the middle distance, chin up, jaw set. "This man," Damien said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "the interim CEO, Gavin Hale, your brother-in-law. If my background check was accurate, is this the one who fired you?" I looked at the picture. I nodded. "Yes, that is him." Damien let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a dry sound, like dry leaves crunching underfoot. He pulled the phone back and looked at the picture himself, shaking his head slightly. "Did he give a reason?" Damien asked. He was not asking out of sympathy. He was gathering intelligence. "I spilt coffee on his suit," I said. Damien looked up at me, his eyebrows raising. "You spilt coffee? And he fired the director of technical operations 7 minutes before a $2 billion due diligence meeting?" "He felt I was insubordinate," I replied, "and that the company did not need me to explain the system to you. He said he would handle the investor himself." Damien stared at me for a long moment. The predatory light in his eyes intensified. He looked like he was doing math in his head, calculating variables, risks, and sudden, unexpected dividends. "He said he would handle me," Damien repeated. He slid his phone back into his pocket. "That is fascinating. Truly, Ms. Whitfield, in my line of work, we spend millions of dollars trying to find the structural weaknesses in a company before we buy it. We hire investigators. We run stress tests. But sometimes, you just get lucky. Sometimes, the structural weakness walks right up to you in the lobby and introduces itself." He stepped closer to me. The air between us changed. This was no longer a meeting between an investor and a company representative. This was something else. "He does not know the system, does he?" Damien asked softly. "He can pronounce the name of it," I said. "That is about as far as his knowledge goes." "And the code?" "I wrote the core kernel myself," I said. "The team maintains it, but the architectural logic keeps the data integrity intact during the merge. That is in my head, and on my private encrypted drive." Damien nodded slowly. He checked his watch again. "Listen to me closely," he said. His voice was low, designed only for my ears. "I am going to go upstairs in about 5 minutes. I am going to let Gavin Hale shake my hand. I'm going to let him talk. I am going to let him dig a hole so deep he will never see the sun again. But before I do that, I need to know if you are ready to play the real game." "What game?" I asked. "The game where we stop pretending this company is a family picnic and start treating it like a $2 billion asset," Damien said. "Gavin Hale just handed me a loaded gun. I need to know if you are willing to help me aim it." My heart hammered against my ribs. Upstairs, Gavin was probably frantically wiping his suit, rehearsing his buzzwords, thinking he had solved his problem by getting rid of me. He had no idea that he had just sent his biggest threat directly into the arms of the one man who could destroy him. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "Meet me in 1 hour," Damien said. "There is a private club on 42nd Street, the Avery. Do you know it?" "I know it," I said. "It was a place for senators and oil tycoons, not technical directors." "1 hour," Damien commanded. "Bring everything you have, the data, the logs, the proof of what you built, and Ms. Whitfield?" "Yes?" "Do not go home. Do not cry. Do not call your husband. You are a free agent now. Act like one." Before I could answer, I heard the heavy footsteps of security approaching from the direction of the turnstiles. I turned my head slightly. It was not Marcus. It was the head of building security, a man who usually only came down for fire drills. He looked serious, his hand resting on his belt, his eyes fixed on me. Gavin had called down. He wanted to make sure I was physically removed from the premises. He wanted the spectacle. He wanted the humiliation to be complete. Damien saw the guard approaching too. He did not step in to save me. He did not wave the guard away. He simply watched, waiting to see how I would handle it. It was a test. The guard stopped 3 feet away from us. "Ms. Whitfield," he said, his voice booming slightly in the quiet lobby. "Mr. Hale has instructed that you represent a security risk. I need to escort you to the exit immediately." I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I looked at the guard, and then I looked at Damien. Damien's face was impassive, but there was a challenge in his eyes. "Show me," his eyes said. "Show me you are not a victim." I turned to the guard. I did not argue. I did not look at my feet. I squared my shoulders. "That will not be necessary. Frank," I said. My voice was cool, detached. "I was just leaving. Mr. Crow and I have finished our business." I turned back to Damien. "I will see you," I said. I did not say in an hour. I did not give anything away. Damien dipped his head, a microscopic nod of respect. "Goodbye, Ms. Whitfield." I walked past the guard before he could grab my arm. I pushed through the revolving glass doors and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The city noise hit me instantly. The sirens, the honking taxis, the rush of millions of people living their lives. The sunlight was blinding after the fluorescent tomb of the office. I stood there for a moment, the wind catching my hair. I had been fired. I had lost my salary, my title, and likely my marriage, given how Ethan always sided with his brother. But as I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushed against the cool metal of the USB drive I always kept on my keychain. My break glass in case of emergency backup. Gavin thought he had stripped me naked. He thought he had taken everything. I took a deep breath of the polluted, wonderful city air. I flagged down a taxi. 42nd Street, I told the driver. I was not going home to cry. I had a meeting to prepare for. And for the first time in my life, I was the one holding all the cards. I sat in the back of the yellow taxi, watching the city blur past the smudged window. My hands were resting in my lap, and they were perfectly still. It was strange. 5 minutes ago, I had been vibrating with adrenaline, standing toe-to-toe with a billionaire investor. Now, alone in the quiet hum of the cab, the reality of the situation began to settle over me like a heavy, wet blanket. I needed to make a phone call. Logic dictated that I should call a lawyer first, or perhaps a recruiter, but instinct, that foolish, hopeful thing that lives in the chest, told me to call my husband. Ethan needed to know, surely. Once he heard that his brother had fired me for a dry cleaning accident minutes before the most important meeting in company history, he would be furious. Surely. He would see the insanity of it. I pulled my phone out. My thumb hovered over Ethan's name. I pressed call. It rang once, twice, then he picked up. Nora? His voice was not panicked. It was not confused. It was tight, controlled. It was the voice of a man who had already been briefed and was currently reading from a mental script. Ethan, I said, letting out a breath I did not know I was holding. I am in a cab. I need you to listen to me. Gavin just... I know. Ethan cut me off. I know what happened. Nora, Gavin just called the family group chat. Mom is hyperventilating. I blinked, staring at the gray fabric of the seat in front of me. He called the group chat? Ethan? He fired me. He had security escort me out because I spilt coffee. He said you were screaming, Ethan said. His tone was accusatory, weary. He said you were hysterical in the hallway. He said you threw the cup at him because he asked you about the budget overrun. Threw it? I repeated, my voice rising. Ethan, I tripped. It was an accident, and there is no budget overrun. I came in under budget for 3 consecutive quarters. You know that. You saw the spreadsheets last night. There was a pause on the other end, a long, heavy silence. When Ethan spoke again, his voice had dropped an octave, shifting from accusation to a patronizing form of management. Look, Nora, you know how much pressure Gavin is under. This is his first week. He is trying to lead the company into a public offering. He needs support, not drama. Drama? I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I was on my way to secure $2 billion for your family's company. Gavin stood in my way, insulted me, and then fired me. I am the victim here. Ethan? Are you? Ethan asked. The question hung there, sharp and poisonous. What is that supposed to mean? I asked. Gavin has been saying for weeks that you are difficult to work with, Ethan said. He says you are secretive, that you hoard the data, that you refuse to let him into the back end of the system because you want to control everything. He says you are arrogant. Nora. I closed my eyes. The pieces were clicking together with a terrifying precision. This was not about the coffee. The coffee was just the spark. The fuel had been laid out weeks ago. Gavin had been planting seeds of doubt in the family's mind, painting me as the obstinate, power-hungry outsider who refused to respect the hierarchy. He knew he could not manage the technical side of the business, so instead of learning it, he decided to eliminate the person who made him feel inferior. He wanted me gone before the board meeting so he could stand up there and claim the Argent pipeline was his vision, his architecture, his success. He is lying, I said quietly. He does not have access to the back end because he does not know how to code. Ethan, if he touched the command line, he would crash the logistics network in 5 minutes. I was protecting the company. Well, right now, it looks like you were protecting your ego, Ethan snapped. And now you have ruined his suit. Do you know how much that bespoke wool costs? He has to meet Damien Crowe in that stain. I pulled the phone away from my ear and stared at it. I could not believe what I was hearing. I had just lost my career, my reputation, and my livelihood, and my husband was worried about a jacket. I offered to pay for the suit, I said, putting the phone back to my ear. My voice was colder now. But that is not the point. Ethan, I was fired. Your brother just cut off our income source because he has an inferiority complex. Are you going to say anything to him? I already spoke to him, Ethan said. And? And I convinced him not to press charges for the assault, Ethan said, as if he expected me to thank him. He is willing to be generous. Nora, for the sake of the family, for the sake of my marriage. Generous? I laughed. It was a dark, mirthless sound. He says if you come back tomorrow, apologize to him in front of the executive team, and sign a formal admission of misconduct, he will let you keep a job at Northgate, Ethan explained. Not as director, obviously. We cannot have you in leadership after a stunt like that, but he is willing to offer you a senior analyst role. You would report to the new VP he is bringing in. I sat there, stunned. The audacity was breathtaking. They wanted me to return, humiliated, stripped of my rank, and forced me to train my replacement, all while admitting to a temper tantrum I never threw. They wanted to break me. They wanted to turn me into a silent, obedient worker bee who would keep the system running while Gavin took the credit and the stock options. You want me to apologize, I said slowly, for being fired. I want you to fix this, Ethan said, his voice pleading now. Nora, please, just swallow your pride. Do it for us. I cannot have my wife at war with my brother. It makes Sunday dinner impossible. Just go back, keep your head down, and let Gavin lead. Is that so hard? I looked out the window. We were passing the park near our house. The trees were green. The sky was blue. And my marriage was dead. I realized that now. It had probably been dead for a long time, killed by 1,000 small cuts of Ethan prioritizing his family's approval over my dignity. Today was just the funeral. Ethan, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, I have one question for you. What? Are you trying to save me, or are you trying to save your brother? The line went silent. I waited. I counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Silence. He did not say you. He did not say us. He did not say anything. In his silence, I heard the entire history of the Hale family dynamic. The eldest son was the golden child, the prince who could do no wrong. Everyone else existed to support him, to clean up his messes, to make him look good. I had been brought into the family not as a partner, but as a utility. And when the utility stopped working as intended, it was time to reformat it. I see, I said. Nora, do not be dramatic, Ethan started, sensing he had lost ground. I am just trying to be pragmatic. Think about the mortgage. Think about... I pressed the red button on the screen. The call ended. The taxi pulled up to the curb in front of our house. It was a beautiful house, a colonial revival with white shutters and a manicured lawn. I had paid for the renovation of that porch. I had paid for the landscaping. I paid the driver and stepped out. I did not run inside. I walked with a deliberate, terrifying calm. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the foyer. The house was silent. Ethan was still at his office, likely fielding texts from his mother about how I had tried to sabotage the family legacy. I did not go to the bedroom. I did not pack a suitcase. I did not take the jewelry Ethan had bought me for our 5th anniversary. I did not want anything that came from the Hale money. I walked straight to my home office at the back of the house. It was a small room, lined with bookshelves and monitors. This was where I had built the Argent pipeline. While Gavin was skiing in Aspen, I was here. While Ethan was watching football, I was here. I had written 90% of the code in this chair, fueled by late-night espresso and the naive belief that hard work would be rewarded with loyalty. I knelt by the fireproof safe bolted to the floor inside the closet. I spun the dial. Left to 24, right to 10, left to 34. The heavy door clicked open. Inside, sitting on top of our marriage certificate and passports, was a black external hard drive. It was ruggedized, encrypted, and labeled with a piece of blue masking tape that simply read, Argent, Master. I picked it up. It was cold in my hand. When I signed my employment contract with Northgate 4 years ago, the company was a mess. They had no IP, no leverage. I had insisted on a clause, standard for high-level developers but often overlooked by lazy legal teams, that stated any code developed on my personal equipment prior to full integration remained my intellectual property until specific vesting milestones were met. Gavin had fired me 7 days before my final vesting cliff. He thought he was being clever. He thought he was saving the company money by cutting me loose before my equity fully matured. But in doing so, he had triggered the reversion clause. Technically, legally, and physically, the source code on this drive belonged to me. The version running on the company servers was now, by the letter of the law, an unauthorized copy. I slipped the hard drive into my purse. It nestled there next to the USB stick I had in my pocket. The USB was the presentation. The hard drive was the nuclear bomb. I stood up and looked around the room one last time. I looked at the framed photo on the desk of Ethan and me in Hawaii. We looked happy. I wondered if I was happy then, or if I was just busy. I walked out of the office. I walked out of the house. I locked the front door behind me, leaving my key under the mat. I pulled my phone out again. I saw a string of text messages coming in. From Ethan, "Don't do anything stupid." From Ethan, "Mom wants to talk to you." From Gavin, "If you leak anything to the press, I will sue you into poverty." I did not reply. I held down the power button on the side of the phone. The screen went black. I walked down the driveway to the street. I did not call another cab. I began to walk toward the train station, my heels clicking on the pavement. The wind was picking up, blowing leaves across the road. I was 34 years old. I had no job. I had no husband. I had no home I could return to tonight. But as I clutched my bag tighter to my side, feeling the weight of the drive against my hip, I felt lighter than I had in years. I was done fixing their mistakes. I was done apologizing for my competence. I was done saving the Hales. Gavin wanted a war? He was about to find out that he had fired the only soldier in his army who knew how to shoot. I checked the time on my wristwatch. 40 minutes until my meeting with Damian Crow. I started to walk faster. I had a lot to prepare. The Avery was the kind of place that made you feel underdressed even if you were wearing a tuxedo. It was tucked away behind an unmarked mahogany door on 42nd Street, a private club that smelled of old leather, single malt scotch, and silence. The kind of silence that costs $50,000 a year in membership fees. I walked in, still clutching my purse, feeling the cold weight of the hard drive against my hip. The maitre d' did not ask for my name. He simply nodded, as if he had been expecting the woman who had just walked out on her marriage and her career. He led me through the dimly lit room to a corner booth where Damian Crow was waiting. Damian did not stand up this time. He was reviewing a thick stack of documents, a glass of sparkling water untouched beside him. When I sat down, he slid a single sheet of paper across the polished wood table. "Read the highlighted paragraph," Damian said. "No hello, no small talk, just business." I looked down at the paper. It was a draft term sheet for the Series D funding round. The numbers were staggering: a valuation of $2 billion, a cash injection of $400 million. But my eyes went to the section Damian had marked in yellow ink. Condition of closing: retention of key personnel. Usually, this section lists the CEO, the CFO, maybe the founder, but there, in black and white, was only one name: Nora Whitfield, Director of Technical Operations. I looked up at him, my throat tight. "I do not understand. Gavin is the CEO. His name should be here." "Gavin is a figurehead," Damian said, his voice dropping to that low, dangerous register I had heard in the lobby. "He is a suit, a mascot. I do not invest $2 billion in mascots. Nora, I invest in infrastructure. I invest in the Argent pipeline." He leaned back, studying me with those predatory, intelligent eyes. "I have had forensic accountants and data analysts inside your network for 3 months," he continued. "We know everything. We know that since Gavin took over as interim CEO, your server latency has increased by 12%. We know that 3 senior back-end engineers resigned last week. We know that the weekly efficiency reports are being manually adjusted, doctored, to look green when they should be red." My stomach turned. I knew Gavin was incompetent, but I did not know he was falsifying data. That was not just bad management. That was fraud. He is trying to buy time, I whispered. He thinks if he gets the funding, he can fix the problems later. He is putting lipstick on a corpse, Damien corrected me. And he thinks I am too stupid to notice the smell, but that is not the irony of today, is it? Damien tapped his finger on the table, a slow, rhythmic beat. The irony, he said, is that Gavin Hale just fired the one person I intended to keep at all costs. He decapitated his own company 7 days before the check was supposed to clear. I stared at the paper. For years, I had been told by Ethan, by Gavin, by my mother-in-law, that I was lucky to be part of the Hale family business, that I should be grateful they let me play with their computers. But the truth was sitting right here. I was not the accessory. I was the engine. So, what happens now? I asked. You walk away? You pull the deal? I could, Damien said. I could walk away this afternoon, release a statement saying Northgate Dynamics failed due diligence, and watch the stock price go to zero by Tuesday morning. It would be easy. He paused, letting the destruction hang in the air. But I want the Argent pipeline, he said, and I want it run by someone who knows how to scale it. I want you. I felt a flush of heat, a mix of vindication and fear. I cannot go back there. Damien. Gavin made sure of that. Security escorted me out. My husband is practically asking me to apologize for existing. I do not want you to go back as an employee, Damien said. I want you to go back as a condition. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, closing the distance between us. Here is the reality. Gavin has fired you. He has confiscated your laptop. He has locked you out of the building. He thinks he has won. So, on Monday morning, when the full board convenes for the final technical presentation, who is going to present the Argent pipeline? I blinked. He will try to do it himself. Exactly, Damien said. A cruel smile played on his lips. He will stand up there with your slides. He will use your words. He will try to bluff his way through the architecture of a system he has never bothered to understand. He will fail, I said. The board will ask questions. The technical committee will drill down into the API integration protocols. Gavin thinks an API is a type of beer. Precisely, Damien said, and that is where you come in. You want me to help him? I asked, confused. No, Damien said sharply. I want you to stop saving him. The words hit me like a physical blow. Stop saving him. I realized then that for 8 years, that was all I had done. When Gavin oversold a feature to a client, I stayed up all night coding it so he would not look like a liar. When he missed a budget projection, I cut costs in my department to balance his ledger. I had been the invisible safety net beneath his high-wire act, catching him every time he fell, while he took bows for his balance. I am not asking for revenge, Damien said, watching my face. Revenge is emotional. Revenge is messy. This is business. I am asking you to let gravity do its work. Let him stand on that stage alone. Let him answer the questions. Let the board see exactly what they are buying when they buy Gavin Hale. And when he crashes? I asked. When he crashes, Damien said, I will be sitting in the front row, and I will tell the board that the deal is still on the table, but the price has changed. The condition has changed. I will demand a restructuring of the executive suite. Gavin goes, you return, not as a director, but as chief technology officer, with a seat on the board and 5% equity. 5%. Of a $2 billion company, that was $100 million. My hands were shaking under the table. It was too much. It was too fast. Why? I asked. Why would you do this for me? You do not know me. I know your code, Damien said simply, and I know that people like Gavin are a cancer to capital. They destroy value because they care more about their ego than the product. I am tired of seeing good systems ruined by bad men. He sat back. But you have to be willing to walk through the fire. You have to be willing to sit in that room on Monday and watch him drown. I thought of Ethan. I thought of the way he had sounded on the phone, more concerned with his brother's suit than his wife's dignity. I thought of Sunday dinners where I was silenced so the men could talk business. It will destroy my family, I said quietly. If I do this, if I humiliate Gavin in front of the board, Ethan will never forgive me. The Hales will declare war. Damien looked at me with an expression that was not unkind, but it was devoid of pity. It was the look of a general assessing a soldier's resolve. Nora, he said, you think you still have a family to save. You do not. You were fired for a coffee stain. Your husband offered you a demotion to keep the peace. They have already declared war on you. The only difference is that they think you are unarmed. He took a sip of his water. In a crisis, he said, everyone picks a mask. Some pick the victim. Some pick the hero. Your husband picked the dutiful brother. He chose his side. Now you have to choose yours. I looked down at the term sheet again. Retention of key personnel. I thought about the hard drive in my purse, the master copy, the proof. If I did this, there was no going back. I would be burning the bridge to my old life, to the comfortable, quiet suburban existence where I was just Ethan's smart wife who worked too much. But that life was already gone. Gavin had burned it the moment he ordered security to escort me out. I looked up at Damien. I have the data, I said. I have the original commit logs. I have the emails where he asked me to falsify the reports, which I refused to do. I have proof that he tried to access the source code unauthorized. Damien's eyes glittered. Bring it all on Monday. I will, I said. But I have one condition of my own. Name it. When I walk into that boardroom, I said, my voice hardening, I want to walk in with you, not behind you, with you. I am not your assistant in this. Damien, I am the asset. Damien smiled. It was the first genuine smile I had seen from him. It was a smile of recognition. Agreed, he said. Monday morning, 8 o'clock, wear something sharp. It is going to be a funeral. I stood up. My legs felt steady. The fear was still there. But it was different now. It was the cold, focused fear of someone standing on a high diving board, ready to jump. Thank you for the drink, Mr. Crow, I said, even though I hadn't touched it. Call me Damien, he said. Partners use first names. I turned and walked out of the club. The maitre d' opened the heavy mahogany door for me, and I stepped back out onto 42nd Street. The city was loud and chaotic, but for the first time in years, the noise did not bother me. I walked to the curb and raised my hand for a taxi. I was not going to a hotel. I was going to an electronics store. I needed a new laptop. I had a presentation to prepare, not for the projector, but for the cross-examination. I reached into my pocket and touched the USB drive again. It was no longer just a file. It was a lever, and as Archimedes said, with a long enough lever, you can move the world. Or, at the very least, you can tip over a CEO. I checked into a generic business hotel 3 blocks from the train station. It was the kind of place with beige walls, stiff sheets, and a desk that was bolted to the floor. It was perfect. It was a clean room, devoid of memories, devoid of the Hale family, and most importantly, it had high-speed fiber internet. I set up my new laptop, a sleek machine I had purchased with cash an hour ago, and finally turned my phone back on. The device immediately began to spasm on the desk, vibrating violently as a backlog of notifications flooded in. It buzzed and danced across the laminate surface for nearly a full minute. I watched it with a detached curiosity, like a scientist observing a volatile chemical reaction from behind safety glass. There were 14 missed calls from Gavin, 6 from the Vice President of Human Resources, 3 from the Chairman of the Board. I did not call them back. Instead, I accessed the voicemail system. The first message was from Gavin, time-stamped 40 minutes after I had left the building. His voice was tight, feigning a casual tone that cracked at the edges. Nora, it is Gavin. Look, things got heated. I think we both overreacted. Why don't you come back to the office? We can sit down, have a coffee, funny, right? And talk about a transition plan. We need to get you reinstated in the system before the weekend. Call me. The second message, an hour later, was less friendly. Nora, pick up the phone. You are in possession of company property. If you do not return the laptop and the access keys immediately, I will be forced to involve legal. Do not make this harder on yourself. The third message was from the chairman, a man named Arthur Sterling, who had always looked at me as if I were a piece of office furniture. Ms. Whitfield, this is Arthur. I heard there was an incident. I'm sure it is just a misunderstanding. We value your contribution. Please call my personal line. We would hate for this to impact your vesting schedule. They were terrified. They realized, likely after trying to run a basic system query, that I was not just an employee they could discard. I was the admin, and without the admin, the kingdom was dark. I deleted the messages. My phone pinged with a secure message on Signal. It was from Ben, the lead back-end engineer. Ben was one of the few people at Northgate who actually knew how the database was structured. He was loyal to the code, not the crown. Ben, the place is a zoo. Gavin is down here in the server room screaming at the IT guys. He is looking for the Argent master files. He told everyone you sabotaged the repo before you left. He is trying to paint you as a disgruntled hacker. I typed back, I did not sabotage anything. I just took my personal IP. The system is running on the last stable build. Is he trying to push an update? Ben, he is trying to access the root directory to show the board he has control. But he does not have the encryption key. He is sweating through his shirt. Nora, it is ugly. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp expression that felt unfamiliar on my face. Nora, let him sweat. Do not help him. Ben, if you touch that keyboard, you are liable when he crashes it. Ben, copy that. I'm taking an early lunch. Good luck, boss. I put the phone down and opened a blank document. I named it simply, The Truth. For the next 6 hours, I did not move from that desk. I did not eat. I did not drink. I entered a flow state, the same hyper-focused zone I used when I was coding complex algorithms. But this time, I was not building a logistics network. I was building a cage. I started with the timeline. I went back 18 months, cross-referencing my personal cloud backups, which I had legally maintained per my contract for remote work, with the company's official project milestones. Item 1. The architecture. I pulled up the original white paper for the Argent pipeline. I highlighted the metadata. Author, Nora Whitfield. Created, 2 years ago. Modified by Nora Whitfield. Then I pulled up the slide deck Gavin had sent to the board last month, claiming credit for the visionary restructuring of the data lake. I placed the two documents side by side. Gavin had not even changed the font. He had simply copy-pasted my abstract and replaced my name with his initials. Item 2. The emails. I created a folder of correspondence. I found the emails where Gavin, then just a board observer, had asked me to adjust the latency numbers because the investors do not need to know the granular details. I found my replies refusing to do so. I found his follow-ups, passive-aggressive notes asking if I was not a team player. I arranged them chronologically. It painted a damning picture of a man who viewed truth as an obstacle to be managed. Item 3. The buzzwords. This was the part that gave me the most satisfaction. I created a cheat sheet for the board. On the left column, I listed the terms Gavin loved to use: synergistic blockchain integration, hyperscalable hybrid cloud, AI-driven neural logistics. On the right column, I wrote the technical reality: standard SQL database, rented server space, basic regression algorithm. I annotated the document with specific questions the board could ask to expose him. Ask him to explain the difference between a hot and cold backup. Ask him how he handles race conditions in the order queue. These were questions a first-year computer science student could answer. Gavin would choke on them. But it was around 2 in the morning when I found the smoking gun. I was digging through the security logs from the past month, the ones I had auto-forwarded to my private server for monitoring purposes. I was looking for evidence of his incompetence, but I found something far worse. I froze, my eyes scanning the lines of code. Timestamp: 14 days ago, 0300 hours, user attempt, G. Hale admin. Action: Sudo command. Copy. Root directory to external volume. Status. Denied. Insufficient privileges. I sat back in the stiff hotel chair, my heart pounding. 2 weeks ago, Gavin was not yet the interim CEO. He was just a board member. He had no authorization to access the root directory, let alone copy the entire source code to an external drive. He had tried to steal the company before he even ran it. He wasn't just firing me to hide his incompetence. He had planned to steal the Argent pipeline, force me out, and then likely sell the technology to a competitor or license it back to Northgate through a shell company. He was going to strip the carcass of the family business and leave Ethan and his mother with nothing but the bones. And because the system had blocked him, he had to get rid of the gatekeeper. Me? I took a screenshot of the log. This was not just grounds for dismissal. This was corporate espionage. This was a felony. My phone lit up again. It was a text from Ethan. I stared at his name on the screen. Hubby 3. I needed to change that contact name. Ethan, this has gone too far. Mom is in the hospital with stress-induced palpitations. Gavin is saying you stole proprietary data. If you do not reply to this text with an apology and a promise to return the assets by morning, I am filing for a legal separation at the end of the month. I cannot stay married to a woman who would destroy my family. I read the text twice. 8 years. 8 years of folding his laundry. 8 years of managing his calendar. 8 years of listening to him complain about how his brother overshadowed him, while I quietly built the wealth that paid for his lifestyle. He wasn't asking for the truth. He wasn't asking if I was okay. He was threatening me with abandonment to protect the man who had just tried to rob him blind. I did not feel the sting of tears. I felt the cold, hard click of a lock snapping shut. I did not reply. I did not type out a defense. I simply swiped the notification away. I turned back to my laptop. I took the screenshot of the security log and placed it at the very top of the dossier. I spent the next hour condensing everything into a 2-page executive summary. Damien Crowe was a busy man. He would not read a novel. He needed bullets. He needed impact. He needed blood in the water. Title: Due Diligence Addendum. Technical Risk Assessment. Subject: Operational Fraud and Unauthorized Access Attempts by Interim CEO. It was brutal. It was concise. It was undeniable. I encrypted the file with a 256-bit key. I uploaded copies to 3 different cloud servers. I put a copy on a fresh USB drive. At exactly 7 in the morning, 1 hour before Damien had requested the briefing, I opened my secure email client. 2D. CroweVentureCapital.com. Subject: The Keys to the Kingdom. Attachment: Hale Audit Summary, PDF. I typed a short body message. Damien, attached is the documentation regarding the operational reality of Northgate Dynamics. Pay special attention to page 2, paragraph 3, regarding the security breach attempt on the 14th. I will see you at 8. I am bringing the original source code. Nora. I hit send. I watched the progress bar slide across the screen. Sent. I closed the laptop. The room was silent. Outside, the sun was beginning to rise over the city, casting a pale gray light onto the carpet. I felt exhausted, my eyes burning from the screen glare, but my mind was crystal clear. I walked over to the bed and lay down on top of the covers. Fully dressed, I closed my eyes. For the first time in weeks, my mind did not race with anxiety about deadlines or budget reports or making Ethan happy. I had done the work. The trap was set. The evidence was bulletproof. All I had to do now was wake up, put on my best suit, and watch the world burn. I fell asleep instantly, like a soldier in a trench who knows the shelling has stopped, at least for a few hours. I wore black. It was a sharp, structural dress that cost more than the rent on my first apartment, paired with a blazer that looked less like clothing and more like armor. I had bought it yesterday with the cash from my emergency fund, the same fund Ethan had always told me was unnecessary because we are Hales, we are safe. Monday morning at the Northgate Dynamics Tower, was usually a chaotic symphony of interns rushing for coffee and executives shouting into headsets. Today, the air felt different. It was brittle. I walked toward the security turnstiles. My old badge was gone, surrendered to Gavin's sweaty palm 3 days ago, but my phone displayed a QR code sent directly from the office of Damien Crowe. Frank, the head of security who had been ordered to escort me out on Friday, stepped in front of the gate. He looked tired. He looked like a man who knew he was standing between a rock and a hard place. "Ms. Whitfield," Frank said, his voice low. "Mr. Hale issued a strict do-not-admit order for you." He was very specific. I did not stop walking until I was inches from him. I held up my phone. The screen was bright with the digital guest pass. "This is an invitation from the lead investor of the Series D funding round," I said. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the lobby noise like a scalpel. "If you deny me entry, Frank, you are personally interfering with a $2 billion transaction. Do you want to explain that to the board of directors when they come down here?" Frank looked at the phone. He looked at the guest list on his monitor. He saw Damien Crowe's name attached to mine. He swallowed hard. "I am just doing my job, ma'am," he muttered. "So am I replied. He stepped aside. I scanned the code. The turnstile chirped, a cheerful, affirmative sound, and the barrier slid open. I walked to the elevator bank. I pressed the button for the 34th floor. The ride up was silent. I watched the numbers climb. 10, 20, 30, with every floor. The ghost of the woman who used to work here, the woman who sought validation, who fixed mistakes in the dark, who desperately wanted to be part of the family, faded away. The doors opened on the executive level. Gavin was waiting. He was pacing the corridor right outside the double mahogany doors of the main boardroom. He looked terrible. His skin had a gray, pasty quality to it, and there were dark circles under his eyes that no amount of expensive concealer could hide. He was wearing a new suit, navy blue this time, but it hung on him slightly, as if he had shrunk over the weekend. When he saw the elevator doors open, he stopped pacing. He adjusted his tie, a nervous, jerky motion, and forced a smile that looked like a rictus of pain. "Nora," he said. He stepped forward to block my path to the boardroom. "I see you managed to get past Frank. I will have to write him up." "Good morning, Gavin," I said. I did not slow down. I walked straight toward him, forcing him to either move or collide with me again. He moved. He sidestepped, falling into step beside me, his voice dropping to a frantic whisper. "Look, I am glad you came," he said. The desperation was leaking off him like sweat. "I have been thinking about Friday. I was under a lot of stress. Maybe I was too harsh." I kept walking, my eyes fixed on the boardroom doors. "Is that so?" "Yes," Gavin said, hurrying to keep up with my stride. "I am willing to make this right. Nora, I have drawn up a new contract. We can bring you back as a consultant. I will even approve a 5% salary bump, retroactive." I stopped. I turned to look at him. The hallway was empty except for us. 5%, I repeated. "It is a generous offer," Gavin said, trying to regain his posture of authority. "But I need the files. Right now, I need the Argent master drive. The board is waiting inside. Just hand it over. Go wait in my office, and we will sign the paperwork after lunch." He held out his hand, expecting me to place the salvation of his career into his palm. I laughed. It was a genuine laugh, bright and sharp. "You are incredible, Gavin," I said. "You really think I am here for a job?" "Everyone has a price," he sneered, his mask slipping. "You fired me for a coffee stain," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm. "You humiliated me in front of the staff. You tried to steal my code. And now, 3 minutes before the biggest meeting of your life, you realize you do not know the password to the server." "I am the CEO," Gavin hissed, his face flushing red. "I can have you blacklisted in this industry. I can make sure you never write a line of code for a Fortune 500 company again. Do not test me. Nora, I have the entire Hale family behind me." "I am sure you do," I said. But here's the problem. Gavin, you are the CEO of a shell. You have the title, I have the engine. You are standing here begging for the files because without me, you are just a man in a suit with nothing to sell. I am not begging, he spat. I am commanding. And I am ignoring you, I said, because you are not my boss anymore. You are just a defendant. I turned to the door. Before I could reach the handle, a figure stepped out from the alcove near the emergency exit. It was Ethan, my husband. He was wearing his best suit, the one I had picked out for him for his sister's wedding. He looked handsome, in that weak, soft way he always did, but his eyes were cold. He moved to stand next to Gavin. They formed a wall, two brothers, the Hale dynasty. Ethan did not look at me with love. He did not look at me with regret. He looked at me the way one looks at a rebellious teenager or a broken appliance. Nora, Ethan said. His voice was heavy with disappointment. Give him the drive. Don't do this. Don't destroy us. I asked. There is no us. Ethan, you made that clear when you told me to apologize for being fired. I was trying to protect you, Ethan said. Gavin is family. You do not go against family. If you walk into that room and embarrass him, we are done. I mean it. I will file the papers today. It was a pincer movement. The threat of professional ruin on one side, the threat of divorce on the other. They thought they had me trapped. They thought that by squeezing me from both ends, I would crumble, hand over the data, and retreat to the kitchen where I belonged. I looked at Ethan. I felt a phantom pain in my chest, the ghost of the love I used to have for him, but it was distant now. You are right, Ethan, I said. We are done, but not because of what I am about to do. We are done because you are standing on the wrong side of the door. Nora! Gavin shouted, losing control. He reached out to grab my arm. The heavy mahogany door to the boardroom swung open. Damian Crowe stood there. He looked impeccable. He was holding a file folder, his posture relaxed but commanding. He looked at Gavin's hand hovering near my arm. He looked at Ethan standing like a guard dog. Then he looked at me. Gentlemen, Damian said. His voice was pleasant, polite, and terrifyingly cold. Is there a problem? Gavin snatched his hand back as if he had been burned. No problem. Mr. Crowe, we were just clarifying some personnel issues with Ms. Whitfield before she leaves. Damian checked his watch. Leaves? I certainly hope not. The meeting starts in 90 seconds, and I specifically requested Ms. Whitfield's presence. Gavin swallowed. Sir, she is no longer an employee. It is against protocol to have non-employees in a closed board session regarding sensitive IP. Actually, Damian said, stepping aside and holding the door open. Since the IP in question seems to reside solely in Ms. Whitfield's possession, I would argue it is impossible to have the meeting without her, unless, of course, you are ready to demonstrate the live code integration yourself. Gavin? Gavin froze. He looked at the open door. He looked at me. He knew that if he said yes, he would have to walk in there and type commands he did not know. He knew that if he said no, he was admitting he needed me. Fine, Gavin choked out. She can observe, but she does not speak unless spoken to. Damian smiled, a shark baring its teeth. We shall see, after you, Nora. I stepped past Gavin. I stepped past Ethan. I did not look at them. I walked into the boardroom. The room was vast, dominated by a long oval table made of glass and steel. The morning light poured in through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the city skyline below. 7 people were seated around the table, the board of directors. There was Arthur Sterling, the chairman, a man who had ignored my emails for 3 years. There was the representative from the Teachers' Pension Fund. There were the independent directors. When I walked in, all conversation stopped. They did not look at me with the pity usually reserved for fired employees. They did not look at me with annoyance. They looked at me with intense, focused curiosity. Damian had clearly been setting the stage before I arrived. Ladies and gentlemen, Damian said, walking to the head of the table, I believe you all know Nora Whitfield. Until Friday, she was your Director of Technical Operations. Today, she is here to help us understand exactly what we are buying." Arthur Sterling cleared his throat. "Ms. Whitfield, this is highly irregular." "These are irregular times, Arthur," I said. I pulled out a chair. Not one of the side chairs against the wall, but a seat at the main table, directly opposite where Gavin would have to stand to present. I placed my laptop on the glass surface. I placed the encrypted hard drive next to it. It made a heavy, solid thud that echoed in the quiet room. Gavin and Ethan slunk into the room behind me. Gavin walked to the front, taking his place at the podium. He looked small against the backdrop of the massive projection screen. Ethan took a seat in the back corner, relegated to the shadows. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life. I looked up and caught Damien's eye. He gave me a nearly imperceptible nod. I looked at Gavin. He was fumbling with the clicker, his hands shaking. "Shall we begin?" I asked. The room was silent. The air was electric, and for the first time in 8 years, I was not the one afraid of the dark. The lights in the boardroom dimmed, leaving the space illuminated only by the soft, ambient glow of the city outside and the harsh, high-definition beam of the projector. Gavin stood at the front of the room. He smoothed his tie one last time, a nervous tic I had noticed developing over the last 48 hours, and pressed the button on the clicker. The first slide appeared on the massive screen behind him. The Argent Pipeline, a unified architecture for global logistics. I stared at the screen. I felt a strange, detached sensation, like a ghost haunting my own funeral. That was my title. That was my font choice. Helvetica Neue, bold, in exactly the shade of cobalt blue I had spent 20 minutes selecting because it conveyed stability. That was my diagram. The complex web of nodes and API gateways I had drawn on a whiteboard at 3 a.m. 6 months ago, then painstakingly digitized. Gavin had not changed a single pixel. He had not even bothered to update the date in the footer. "Gentlemen, and Ms. Whitfield," Gavin began, his voice booming with a forced baritone confidence. "What you are looking at is not just software. It is the culmination of my strategic vision for Northgate Dynamics. Over the last year, I have directed our engineering resources to pivot away from legacy systems and embrace a future-proof, AI-driven paradigm." He used the word paradigm. I took a sip of water to hide the small, cold smile that touched my lips. Gavin loved that word. He thought it made him sound like Steve Jobs. He clicked to the next slide. It was a flowchart showing data ingestion rates. "As you can see," Gavin continued, gesturing vaguely at the screen with a laser pointer, "the Argent system handles massive throughput. We are talking about ingestion speeds that are significantly higher than industry standards. The system effectively learns the supply chain, optimizing routes in real time." He looked at the board members, seeking approval. Arthur Sterling, the chairman, nodded sagely. Arthur was a finance man. He liked charts that went up and to the right. He did not care how the engine worked, as long as the car moved fast. "Brilliant, Gavin," Arthur murmured. "Truly impressive leadership." Gavin puffed out his chest. He was gaining momentum. He thought he was safe. He thought that because he had the slides, he had the knowledge. He clicked through the next 3 slides rapidly, glossing over the technical specifications to get to the revenue projections. "And this," Gavin said, landing on a slide full of dollar signs, "is where the technology translates to value. By reducing latency, we increase margin. My projection is that Argent will reduce operational overhead by 30% in the first quarter alone." He smiled. He lowered the laser pointer. "Any questions so far?" It was a rhetorical question. In Gavin's world, board meetings were rubber-stamp sessions where he dazzled old men with big numbers. But today, there was a new player at the table. Sitting 3 seats down from Damien Crowe was a man named Dr. Silas Vance. I knew him by reputation, though I had never met him. He was the technical advisor for the Teachers' Pension Fund, a man with a doctorate in computer science from MIT who had built high-frequency trading platforms in the 90s. He was not looking at the revenue slide. He He was looking at a printout of the architecture diagram, my diagram, that had been distributed before the meeting. Doctor, Vance adjusted his glasses. He did not smile. I have a question. Mr. Hale, Dr. Vance said. His voice was quiet, raspy, and terrifyingly precise. Gavin's smile faltered for a microsecond before reattaching itself. Of course. Silas, go ahead. I am looking at your node architecture here on page 4, Vance said, tapping the paper. You claim this is a real-time system handling global inventory. How exactly are you handling schema conflicts when you merge unstructured data from legacy carriers with the structured JSON packets from the new API? Specifically, what is your conflict resolution strategy for write-heavy loads? The room went silent. The hum of the projector fan suddenly seemed very loud. I watched Gavin. I saw the exact moment the words hit his brain and failed to find purchase. He knew the words data and API, but schema conflict and write-heavy loads were foreign languages. He blinked. He shifted his weight from his left foot to his right. That is an excellent question. Silas, Gavin said. He laughed. A short, breathless sound. Excellent. The conflict resolution, well, it is a key part of the design. He paused. He looked at the screen, as if the answer might magically appear on the slide. It did not. We use a very advanced approach, Gavin said, improvising. It is hybrid. We use a hybrid cloud environment to ensure that the data is scalable and adaptive. He threw the buzzwords out like chaff from a fighter jet, hoping to distract the missile. Doctor, Vance did not blink. Hybrid is a deployment environment. Mr. Hale, it is not a conflict resolution strategy. I am asking about data integrity. If two warehouses update the inventory count for the same SKU at the exact same millisecond, one in Tokyo and one in New York, which write does the database accept? And how do you prevent data loss? Gavin was sweating now. A bead of perspiration broke free from his hairline and tracked a slow, shiny path down his temple. Right, Gavin said. The Tokyo and New York scenario, well, obviously, we prioritize the primary node. The system is designed to be very robust. It scales horizontally. So you are using a master-slave architecture? Vance asked, his brow furrowing. That introduces significant latency. Your slide says you have 0 latency. No, Gavin said quickly, sensing he had stepped into a trap. Not master-slave. It is simultaneous. It is AI-driven. The AI decides. I bit the inside of my cheek. The AI decides. It was the answer of a child pretending to understand a magic trick. Arthur Sterling turned to look at Gavin. The blind admiration was fading, replaced by a flicker of confusion. Gavin? Is something wrong? Nothing is wrong. Arthur, Gavin snapped, his voice too sharp. I am just trying to simplify the technicalities for the board. We do not need to get bogged down in the weeds of coding syntax. I am not in the weeds, Mr. Hale, Dr. Vance said, leaning forward. I am inspecting the foundation of a $2 billion investment. If you cannot explain how you prevent data corruption, then this system is not an asset. It is a liability. Gavin looked around the room. He looked at Ethan in the back corner. Ethan was staring at his shoes, his face pale. He knew. He had heard me talk about these problems at the dinner table for years, but he had never listened. Now, watching his brother drown, he realized that the technical stuff he always dismissed was actually the only thing that mattered. Gavin looked at me. His eyes were wide, pleading. He was begging me to jump in. He wanted me to interrupt, to say, what Gavin means to say is that we use an eventual consistency model with a vector clock for conflict resolution. It would be so easy. It was a sentence of 18 words. I could say it. Save his dignity. Save the meeting. And let him go back to pretending he was the king. I looked at him. I folded my hands on the table. And I said absolutely nothing. The silence stretched. It became a physical presence in the room, heavy and suffocating. Let's move on, Gavin said, his voice cracking. He clicked the remote furiously, skipping 3 slides ahead to a picture of a shipping container. I want to talk about our logistics partnerships. Mr. Hale, Damien Crowe spoke up for the first time. Damien was sitting relaxed in his chair, watching the spectacle with the detached interest of a biologist observing a dissection. He checked his platinum watch, as if noting the time of death. "We will not move on," Damien said. "Dr. Vance raised a critical point. You stated in your opening that you directed the engineering resources. You stated this architecture is your vision." "It is," Gavin said, clutching the podium. "I am the CEO. The buck stops with me." "Then answer the question," Damien said softly. "Or perhaps tell us who actually wrote the code that handles the synchronization, because it is clearly not you." Gavin froze. He looked like a deer caught not in headlights, but in the crosshairs of a rifle. "I managed the team," Gavin stammered. "I gave them the broad strokes. You cannot expect the CEO to write every line of code. That is what the staff is for." "But you fired the staff," Damien pointed out. "You fired the director of technical operations on Friday. So, presumably, you felt you knew enough to take over her duties." "Nora was difficult," Gavin said, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She was an obstructionist. She refused to follow my strategic direction." "And what direction was that?" Dr. Vance asked. "To use AI to solve schema conflicts?" A low murmur of laughter rippled through the room. It was not friendly laughter. It was the sound of credibility evaporating. Gavin's face turned a deep, blotchy crimson. He was losing them. He knew it. And in his panic, he made the classic mistake of the narcissist. He tried to claim credit for the work while blaming others for the failure. "The technical details are being handled by the junior team," Gavin said, his voice rising. "I instructed them to implement a hybrid solution. If they fail to explain it in the documentation, that is a failure of execution, not leadership. I built this company. I brought in this deal." "You built the company?" Damien asked. "Yes," Gavin shouted, slamming his hand on the podium. "I am the one who interfaced with the partners. I am the one who sold the vision. This pipeline, it is my concept. The code is just typing. Anyone can type." I saw the wince on the faces of the board members. Code is just typing. He had just insulted the very product he was trying to sell. Damien turned his chair slightly to face Gavin fully. "If it is just typing, Gavin," Damien said, "then tell me, who wrote the core algorithm? The specific kernel that integrates the tracking data? What is the name of the file?" Gavin opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at the screen behind him, searching for a clue. "It is the main file," Gavin tried. "The Argent executable." "Dr." Vance took off his glasses and placed them on the table. It was a gesture of finality. "There is no such thing as an Argent executable in a Python-based stack," Vance said quietly. Gavin stood there, the laser pointer shaking in his hand, the red dot dancing frantically against the screen like a frantic heartbeat. He was stripped bare. The suit, the title, the family name, none of it could cover the fact that he was empty. Ethan, sitting in the back, finally looked up. He looked at his brother, then he looked at me. His expression was one of dawning horror. He wasn't just watching his brother fail. He was watching the family fortune, the status, the country club memberships, and the easy life dissolve into smoke. He realized, perhaps for the first time, that the arrogant wife he had tried to silence was the only person in the room who actually knew how to keep the lights on. I sat perfectly still, my hands resting on my laptop. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I simply watched. I can find out," Gavin whispered, his voice small. "I can check the repository." "You cannot," I said. It was the first time I had spoken since the presentation began. My voice was calm, clear, and carried to every corner of the room. Gavin's head snapped toward me. "What?" "You cannot check the repository," I said, "because you do not have the password, and even if you did, you would not know where to look. You tried to access the root directory 2 weeks ago to copy the files, but the system blocked you, remember? The room gasped, a collective intake of breath. Arthur Sterling stood up slowly. What did you say, Ms. Whitfield? I repeated, looking straight at Gavin, that the interim CEO attempted an unauthorized copy of the source code onto a personal drive 14 days ago. He failed because he lacks the security clearance, and today, he is standing there presenting my slides, claiming credit for my work, and he cannot answer a basic question about data integrity because he has never read the documentation. Gavin looked like he was going to vomit. She is lying. She is a disgruntled employee. She is trying to sabotage the deal. Am I? I asked. I reached for my laptop. I opened the lid. The screen came alive. I have the logs. Arthur, I said to the chairman. I have the emails. I have the commit history. And I have the original source code, right here on this table. I looked at Damien. He nodded. Shall I show them? I asked. Gavin lunged forward. Don't you dare! But it was too late. The thread had been pulled. The tapestry was unraveling, and I was holding the scissors. You are looking at a saboteur, Gavin shouted, his voice cracking under the strain of the accusation. He pointed a trembling finger at me, abandoning all pretense of executive composure. This is exactly what I have been dealing with for months. She hoards information. She creates intentional bottlenecks. She designed the system so that only she could run it, holding the entire company hostage to secure her own job security. It is classic extortion. He looked around the room, his eyes wild, pleading with the board members to buy into his narrative. I had to fire her, Gavin insisted, breathless. I did not want to, but she was becoming a liability. She refused to share documentation. She refused to train junior staff. I had no choice but to remove the obstruction to protect the asset. It was a good story, in the corporate world. The rogue engineer narrative was a popular one. It played into the fears of non-technical executives who terrified that their IT departments held too much power. Under normal circumstances, with a less informed board, it might have worked. But Damien Crowe was not normal, and he was certainly not uninformed. That is a serious accusation, Mr. Hale, Damien said. His voice was dangerously calm, a stark contrast to Gavin's hysteria. You are claiming that Ms. Whitfield intentionally obfuscated the architecture to make herself indispensable? Yes, Gavin exclaimed, seizing the lifeline. Exactly, she is a bottleneck, a toxic element. Do you have proof? Damien asked. Gavin blinked. Proof? Documentation, Damien clarified. Performance reviews where this issue was cited, emails where you requested access and were denied without cause, incident reports showing that her hoarding of information caused operational delays. Anything other than your current word? I have spoken to people, Gavin stammered. There are rumors in the break room. The culture was shifting. So you have hearsay, Damien said, dismissing him with a wave of his hand. Well, that is unfortunate, because I prefer hard data, and it seems Ms. Whitfield has brought quite a lot of it. Damien tapped a key on his own laptop, which was connected to the room's AV system via a wireless bridge. The image of Gavin's stolen slide deck vanished from the main screen. In its place, a new document appeared. It was titled Timeline of Project Ownership and Attribution. What is this? Arthur Sterling asked, squinting at the screen. This, Damien said, is the receipts. The screen split into 2 columns. On the left was an email chain from 6 months ago. The sender was Gavin Hale. The recipient was the marketing director. I watched the blood drain from Gavin's face as the text was magnified for everyone to see. Subject: Investor Deck Revisions. From Gavin Hale. Text: The technical slides look good, but we need to simplify the narrative. Remove Nora's name from the credits on slides 4 through 10. The investors need to see that this vision comes from the top, not the operations level. I will present this section myself. Just give me the talking points. A ripple of discomfort went through the room. This was not just taking credit, it was active erasure. Damien clicked the remote. The screen changed again. This time, it showed a side-by-side comparison of the commits, the actual saving of code to the central repository. On the left, Damien narrated, is the activity log for the Argent pipeline over the last 2 years. You will see that Ms. Whitfield's user account is responsible for 85% of the core architecture commits. On the right, we have Mr. Hale's activity log. The right side of the screen was completely blank, save for a few logins to the company intranet to check the lunch menu. He does not code, Damien said flatly. He does not architect. He does not even review the pull requests. He essentially erases the name of the architect and then claims the building is his design. I am the CEO, Gavin sputtered, his defense weak and repetitive. My job is strategy, not syntax. Then let's talk about strategy, Dr. Vance interrupted. He was looking at the screen with a mixture of fascination and disgust. Mr. Hale, you just accused Ms. Whitfield of hoarding information and blocking your access. You claimed she made herself a bottleneck. She did, Gavin cried. Then explain this, Damien said. He clicked the remote one more time. The screen shifted to the security log I had found at 2 a.m, the black background with the stark white text of the system rejection. Timestamp, 14 days ago. User, G. Hale, admin. Action, sudo command. Recursive copy, root, Argent, master. Result, access denied. Authentication failed. 14 days ago, Damien read aloud. You were not yet the CEO. You were a board observer, and yet, at 3 a.m, you attempted to use an administrative command to copy the entire source code of the company's most valuable asset to an external drive. The room went dead silent. This was the kill shot. If you understood the system, Gavin, Dr. Vance said, his voice cutting like a razor, you would know that the root directory is geofenced. It cannot be copied to an external drive without a 2-key authentication from the Director of Operations and the CTO. You tried to break into the vault, but you did not know the combination. I was testing the security, Gavin lied, his voice rising to a shriek. I was running a penetration test to see if Nora had secured it properly. Without notifying it? Vance asked. Without a ticket? That is not a test. Mr. Hale, that is a heist. Arthur Sterling turned slowly to look at Gavin. The chairman's face was pale. He realized he was sitting next to a man who had not only lied to him, but had put the entire $2 billion valuation at risk with his incompetence and greed. You tried to steal the code, Arthur whispered. Before the vote, you wanted to secure the asset personally. No! Gavin stepped back, bumping into the podium. You are listening to her. She manipulated the logs. She is a hacker. She is doing this to destroy me because she is jealous. She is unstable. He pointed at me again, his hand shaking so violently that his entire arm vibrated. She is just an angry woman who got fired for incompetence, Gavin yelled. She threw hot coffee on me. She assaulted me. And now she is forging documents to ruin the family legacy. You cannot trust her. I sat there, perfectly still. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend myself. I let his chaotic noise contrast with my absolute silence. Mr. Hale, Damien said, his voice dropping to a low, bored register. We are not interested in your family drama. We are interested in the fact that you just claimed the system was your vision, yet you cannot even log into it. It is a conspiracy, Gavin shouted. He looked frantically toward the back of the room. Ethan, tell them how she is. Tell them she has been planning this. All eyes turned to Ethan. My husband was sitting in the shadows, his face a mask of panic. He had come here to be the supportive brother, the silent partner in the Hale dynasty. He had expected a coronation. Instead, he was witnessing an execution. He stood up, his legs looking unsteady. He looked at Gavin, who was sweating and manic. He looked at the board members, who were staring at him with judgment. And then he looked at me. In his eyes, I saw the calculation. He wanted to save his brother. He needed to save his brother. Because if Gavin fell, the Hale family status fell with him. He needed to validate Gavin's narrative that I was the problem. It is true, Ethan stammered. Nora has been difficult. We talked about it. Talked about what, Mr. Whitfield? Damien asked. About letting her go, Ethan said, the words tumbling out in a rush to defend his brother. Gavin and I discussed it last week, before the coffee thing. We knew we had to get her out before the board meeting. The room froze. I closed my eyes for a brief second. There it was, the final betrayal, but also the final nail in their coffin. Wait, Arthur Sterling said, holding up a hand. Repeat that, Ethan. Ethan blinked, realizing too late that the room's atmosphere had shifted not in his favor, but against him. I said, we discussed it. Gavin said she was a roadblock. He said we needed to clear the path before the investors arrived. So the firing was necessary. So it was not about the coffee, Dr. Vance said, his voice dry. It was not a sudden disciplinary action due to insubordination or a ruined suit. It was a premeditated removal of the key technical architect days before a major liquidity event. Ethan opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at Gavin. Gavin looked at the floor. You fired the only person who understands the product, Arthur Sterling said, his voice rising in anger. Because you wanted to clear the path for yourself? You staged a cause for termination to hide a political purge? We did it for the company, Ethan whispered, his defense crumbling into dust. You did it for your egos, I said. I spoke softly, but in the silence of the room, it sounded like a gavel strike. I stood up. I walked over to the screen where the evidence of Gavin's attempted theft was still glowing in high definition. Gentlemen, I said to the board, you have a choice. You can invest $2 billion in a company run by a man who plagiarizes slides, fails basic technical questions, and attempts to steal source code in the middle of the night. A man whose own brother just admitted they conspired to fire the lead engineer to hide their incompetence. I paused, looking at each of the 7 men and women at the table. Or, I continued, you can acknowledge that the Argent pipeline is real, it is functional, and it is currently sitting on the hard drive in my purse, protected by an encryption key that only I possess. I looked at Gavin. He was slumped against the podium, defeated, small, and utterly exposed. The accident with the coffee was unfortunate, I said. But the accident of your leadership, Gavin, that is catastrophic. I turned back to Damien. I believe the defense rests, I said. Damien did not smile. He did not need to. He simply leaned forward and clasped his hands together. Thank you, Ms. Whitfield, Damien said. I think the board has seen enough. He turned to Arthur Sterling. Arthur, Damien said, my firm is ready to sign the check. The $2 billion is ready for transfer, but I think we all agree that the current management structure is incompatible with the future of this company. Arthur nodded slowly. He looked at Gavin with eyes that were no longer friendly. They were the eyes of a man calculating the cost of a severance package versus a lawsuit. Agreed, Arthur said. Gavin made a sound, a whimpering protest, but no one looked at him. He had become a ghost in his own boardroom. And the woman who was supposed to be crying in the parking lot, stood at the head of the table, waiting for them to ask me what I wanted. The silence that followed my declaration was absolute. It was the kind of heavy, vacuum-sealed silence that usually precedes a natural disaster or a verdict. Gavin was still clinging to the podium like a shipwreck survivor clinging to driftwood, but the current had already swept past him. Arthur Sterling turned his chair slowly to face me. The chairman looked 10 years older than he had when the meeting began. The confident veneer of the seasoned executive was gone, replaced by the grim calculation of a man trying to salvage a sinking ship. Ms. Whitfield, Arthur said, his voice measured but lacking its usual boom. You have made some very serious assertions. You claim the architecture on the screen is yours. You claim the system is viable, despite Mr. Hale's difficulties in explaining it. I do not claim it, Arthur, I said, sitting down and resting my hands on the cool glass table. I built it. Then tell us, Dr. Clemences cut in. He was leaning forward, his eyes sharp behind his wire-rimmed glasses. Forget the sales pitch. Forget the revenue projections. Tell me how the Argent pipeline handles a 40% surge in volume without locking the database. Tell me how we scale this if we close the deal. I took a breath. I did not look at Gavin. I did not look at Ethan. I looked directly at Vance. The issue with the legacy system was the monolithic architecture. I began. My voice was steady, the words flowing with the ease of someone reciting their own biography. Gavin's slides mentioned a hybrid cloud, but that is a marketing term. The reality is that Argent uses a microservices architecture. We sharded the database horizontally based on geographic regions. When a surge hits the North American node, it does not lock the table for the European node. They operate independently, synchronizing only the reconciliation data every 15 milliseconds. Vance nodded. It was a small, tight movement. And the latency? We cache the read-heavy data at the edge, I explained. The inventory numbers you see on the dashboard are served from local memory, not the central database. That cuts the read time down to 4 milliseconds. The write time, the actual booking of an order, takes 12 milliseconds because it requires a two-phase commit to ensure consistency. It is not zero latency because zero latency is a myth, but it is faster than anything FedEx or DHL is running. Vance sat back. He looked at Arthur Sterling. She knows the stack. That is the correct answer. That is the only answer that works at this scale. She is just reciting specs, Gavin blurted out, his voice thin and reedy. I told her those specs. I gave her the white paper. Mr. Hale? Arthur Sterling snapped, not even looking at him. Be quiet. Gavin's mouth snapped shut with an audible click. He sank back into himself, his face the color of old ash. Arthur looked back at me. Okay, the technology works, but technology is only half the equation. We have a leadership crisis. We have a CEO who apparently, he glanced at Gavin with distaste, cannot access his own system, and we have an investor who is likely reconsidering his position. All eyes turned to Damien Crowe. Damien had been watching me while I answered Vance's questions. He looked like a man who had just bet on a long-shot horse and watched it cross the finish line by 3 lengths. I am not reconsidering the position, Damien said calmly. I am reconsidering the terms. He opened the leather folder in front of him. He pulled out a gold fountain pen and uncapped it. The valuation of Northgate Dynamics is based on the Argent pipeline, Damien stated. Without that software, this company is just a collection of trucks and warehouses with declining margins. I am still willing to invest $2 billion, but I have 2 non-negotiable conditions. Name them, Arthur said. First, Damien said, we end the nepotism. The Hale Family Trust has treated this public company like a private fiefdom for too long. Promoting a family member to CEO without technical qualification is not just bad governance, it is negligence. Gavin Hale is to be removed from all executive functions, effective immediately. I heard a gasp from the back of the room. It was Ethan. He looked as if someone had just punched him in the stomach. The Hale dynasty, the plan, the inheritance, it was all evaporating. And the second condition? Arthur asked, looking pained but resigned. The second condition is personnel, Damien said. The deal closes only if we retain the architect of the system. We need Nora Whitfield. Arthur turned to me. He forced a smile. It was a tight, painful grimace. Well, Nora, it seems you have a lot of leverage. I think we can agree that the firing was a mistake, a misunderstanding of high stress. We are prepared to reinstate you immediately. Same salary, full benefits, and we will even discuss a bonus for the disruption. He spoke as if he were doing me a favor, as if allowing me to return to my cubicle was a grand gesture of forgiveness. I looked at Arthur. Then I looked at the empty chair at the head of the table. No, I said. The room blinked. "Excuse me?" Arthur asked. "I said no," I repeated. "I am not asking for my job back. Arthur, my job does not exist anymore. You cannot reinstate an employee you publicly marched out of the building. The trust is gone." "Then what do you want?" Arthur asked, his tone hardening slightly. "We are offering to fix the mistake." "You are offering a bandage for a gunshot wound," I said. "If you want the Argent pipeline, you need the encryption key, and if you want the encryption key, you need me. But I'm not coming back as a director. I am not coming back to report to a new VP you hire from outside." I paused. I let the silence stretch again. I wanted them to feel the weight of it. "I want the role of Chief Technology Officer," I said clearly. "I want a seat on the board. I want full autonomy over the engineering budget, independent of the CEO. And I want 5% equity in the company, fully vested upon signing." 5%? The representative from the teacher's pension fund nearly choked on his water. "That is preposterous. That is founder-level equity. You are an employee. Ms. Whitfield. We cannot just hand over 5% of a $2 billion entity." "Why not?" I asked. "You were about to hand over 100% of the entity to a man who tried to steal the code." I gestured to Gavin, who was staring at the table, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. "That is different," the representative sputtered. "He is a Hale. It is family stock." "And that is exactly why this company is failing," I said. "You value blood over competence. You think 5% is expensive? Try calculating the cost of 0%, because without me, that is what you have. You have a slide deck, you have a logo, but you do not have the product." I leaned forward. "The encryption on the drive is military grade," I said. "If I walk out of this room, I take the Argent pipeline with me. I wrote the IP reversion clause in my contract. It is legally mine. You can sue me, and we can spend the next 5 years in court while your stock price crashes and your competitors build their own systems. Or you can give me what I earned." "This is extortion," Ethan whispered from the back. I turned to look at him. My husband. The man who had texted me to apologize or face divorce. "It is not extortion, Ethan," I said softly. "It is the free market. You just never thought I would be the one setting the price." Ethan looked at me, and for the second time that morning, I saw something new in his eyes. It wasn't anger anymore, it was fear. He was looking at me and realizing that the woman he had married, the quiet, supportive, easy wife, was gone. In her place was a stranger who held the power to bankrupt his family. He realized, with a terrifying clarity, that he could no longer control me. The strings had been cut. "She is right," Damien Crowe said. He did not look at the board. He looked at me, and there was a flicker of genuine respect in his eyes. "The valuation is $2 billion, Damien continued. 5% is $100 million. It is a steep price, but frankly, gentlemen, without Ms. Whitfield, I am valuing this company at the price of its real estate assets, which is about $40 million. So, she is actually creating $1.9 billion of value for you. Asking for 5% of that seems mathematically conservative." Arthur Sterling rubbed his temples. He looked at Dr. Vance. "Silas?" Arthur asked. "Can we rebuild it, if she walks?" Dr. Vance shook his head slowly. "Not in time. We would have to reverse engineer the entire stack. It would take 18 months. We would miss the market window. The competitors would eat us alive. We need the code today." Arthur sighed. It was a long, heavy sound of a man accepting defeat. "We need 10 minutes, Arthur said. "The board needs to confer in private." "Of course," I said. I stood up. I picked up my purse, making sure the hard drive was secure inside. I did not pick up the laptop on the table. I left it there, the screen still showing the damning evidence of Gavin's theft, burning like a neon sign in the middle of the room. "I will be in the hallway," I said. I walked toward the door. As I passed Gavin, he did not look up. He was vibrating slightly, a low-frequency tremor of pure panic. I passed Ethan. He looked like he wanted to grab my arm, to beg, to threaten, to say something Amelie related, but he didn't move. He sat frozen, pinned by the realization that he was no longer the protagonist of this story. I opened the heavy door and stepped out into the corridor. The door clicked shut behind me, muting the sudden eruption of voices that broke out inside the room. The hallway was empty, the carpet was plush, the abstract art on the walls was bland and expensive. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window at the end of the hall. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass. My hands were not shaking. That surprised me. I thought I would be trembling. I thought I would feel the crash of adrenaline, but instead, I felt a strange, hollow calm. I had just demanded $100 million and the crown of the company. I had just dismantled my husband's family legacy in under 20 minutes. I had just ended my marriage in all but paperwork. I took a deep breath, my lungs filled with the conditioned air of the building I was about to own. I did not cry. I did not feel sad. I felt like a machine that had finally been allowed to run at full capacity. I checked my watch. 2 minutes had passed. I watched the traffic far below. Tiny yellow taxis weaving through the grid. They looked like data packets moving through a network. I waited. I knew what they were doing in there. They were shouting. They were blaming Gavin. They were calculating the dilution of their shares. But in the end, they were doing the math, and the math was on my side. For 8 years, I had let them treat me as a variable, something that could be adjusted, minimized, or deleted. Today, I had made myself the constant. I heard the door handle click behind me. I turned around. It wasn't Arthur. It wasn't the secretary. It was Damien Crowe. He had stepped out of the meeting, leaving the board to their bloodletting. He walked toward me, his expression unreadable. He stopped 3 feet away. "You play a hard game, Nora," he said. "I learned from the best," I replied, holding his gaze. "Is it a yes?" Damien smiled. "They are currently screaming at Gavin, but Arthur is already drafting the term sheet. You got the equity, you got the title." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "And the autonomy?" "Total," Damien said. "I told them if they interfere with your engineering decisions, I trigger a penalty clause that drains their liquidity." He looked at me, tilting his head slightly. "One question," he said. "When you asked for 5%, were you bluffing?" "No," I said. "I was discounting." Damien laughed. It was a rich, genuine sound. "Good," he said. "Get ready. They are going to call you back in. Try to look gracious when you accept their surrender." "I will try," I said. "And Nora?" "Yes?" "Don't let them see you smile," he said. "It scares them." I turned back to the window, catching my reflection in the glass. I didn't look like a wife. I didn't look like a victim. I looked like the CEO. And for the first time in my life, I liked what I saw. The heavy mahogany door opened, and Arthur Sterling stood in the frame. He did not look like the master of the universe anymore. He looked like a man who had just swallowed a very bitter pill and was trying desperately to keep it down. "Ms. Whitfield," Arthur said. His voice was stiff. "Please come back in." I walked past him. I did not hurry. I walked with the measured pace of someone who knows the meeting cannot start without them. The room had changed. The energy had shifted entirely. 10 minutes ago, it was a tribunal. Now, it was a surrender ceremony. Gavin was no longer standing at the podium. He was sitting in a chair against the far wall, staring at his hands. He looked small. The bravado, the expensive suit, the confident posture, it had all collapsed, leaving behind a frightened man who knew his free ride was over. I took my seat at the head of the table, next to Damien's empty chair. Damien followed me in and sat down, capping his pen with a decisive click. "The board has deliberated," Arthur announced, remaining standing. He looked at the other members, who nodded in solemn agreement. "Given the sensitive nature of the technology and the immediate requirements of the Series D funding, we have decided to accept your terms, Ms. Whitfield." He paused, as if hoping I would interrupt and offer a discount. I did not. Effective immediately, Arthur continued, his voice monotone. You are appointed Chief Technology Officer of Northgate Dynamics. You will have a seat on the board as an executive director. You will have full autonomy over the engineering division and its budget. And the equity? I asked. Arthur winced. 5%? Fully vested. The paperwork is being drawn up by legal now. I nodded. And the leadership issue? Arthur turned to look at the man slumped against the wall. Gavin Hale has agreed to step down as CEO, effective immediately, Arthur said. He is citing health reasons, exhaustion. He will remain on the payroll as a non-executive consultant for the remainder of the fiscal year to ensure a smooth transition, provided he signs a comprehensive non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement. He will have no operational authority. He will not have access to the building. It was a polite execution. They were paying him to go away and stay quiet. It was more mercy than he deserved, but it was enough to get him out of my way. Is this acceptable? Arthur asked me. I looked at Gavin. He refused to meet my eyes. It is acceptable, I said. Damien Crowe leaned forward. He slid a thick document across the table toward Arthur. Then we have a deal, Damien said. This is the commitment letter for the first tranche of the $2 billion. I want the press release to go out at noon. It should state clearly that the investment is contingent on the new technical leadership. Arthur signed the document. His hand shook slightly. Damien signed it. His hand was rock steady. Then Damien stood up and turned to me. He extended his hand. Congratulations. Nora, he said. He did not say it quietly. He said it so the entire room could hear. I look forward to building this company with a real partner. I took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and respectful. It was the handshake of an equal. Thank you, Damien, I said. Let's get to work. I picked up my laptop. I picked up the encrypted hard drive. I stood up. I will expect the revised contracts on my desk by tomorrow morning, I told Arthur. And I want the engineering team called for an all-hands meeting at 9. We have a lot of code to fix. I turned and walked out of the room. I did not look at Gavin. He was already part of the past. I walked into the hallway, the adrenaline finally beginning to ebb, replaced by a deep, resonant sense of finality. I had won. I had actually won. Nora! The voice came from behind me. It was desperate, pleading, and familiar. I stopped near the elevator bank and turned around. Ethan was running down the hall toward me. He looked disheveled. His tie was crooked. The perfectly curated image of the supportive husband was gone. He stopped a few feet away, breathing hard. He looked at me, searching for the woman he had married, the woman who fixed things, the woman who forgave. Nora, he gasped. Wait, we need to talk. I have a meeting. Ethan, I said coolly, I have a company to run. Stop it, he said, reaching out to grab my arm. I pulled back sharply, and he flinched. Nora, please, you cannot just leave like this. You just destroyed Gavin inside that room. Do you know what you did? Arthur says Gavin is banned from the building. Banned. He is a Hale. He is a liability, I said. And now he is unemployed. He should be grateful he is not facing criminal charges for corporate espionage. Think about Mom, Ethan pleaded. Think about the family. How am I supposed to explain this at Sunday dinner? You humiliated us. You took the money. You took the job, and you cut Gavin's throat. I saved the company, I corrected him, and I saved your inheritance. Ethan, you should be thanking me. Without me, that stock would be 0 by Friday. I do not care about the stock, Ethan shouted. I care about us. You are my wife. Nora, you are supposed to be on my side. You are supposed to help me, not war with my brother. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had shared a bed with for 8 years. I realized I was looking at a stranger. He did not care that I was fired. He did not care that I was insulted. He only cared that I had broken the script. Ethan, I said quietly, I have one question for you. He stopped, his chest heaving. What? In the last 4 days, I said, From the moment Gavin screamed at me in the hallway to the moment you stood up in that boardroom, did you ever, even once, stand by me? Did you ever defend me? Did you ever think about what was best for me? Ethan opened his mouth. He wanted to lie. I could see it in his eyes. He wanted to say yes, but the weight of the truth was too heavy. He had told me to apologize. He had told me to take a demotion. He had testified against me in the boardroom to save his own skin. He closed his mouth. He looked down. "That is what I thought," I said. I reached into my purse. I pulled out my wedding ring. It was a simple band, chosen by his mother because she thought diamonds were too flashy for a girl from my background. I placed the ring on the marble bench next to the elevator. "I will have my lawyer send over the separation papers," I said. "I will not ask for alimony. I will not ask for the house. You can keep the Hale estate. I have my own equity now." "Nora, don't," Ethan whispered. "You are making a mistake. You are going to be alone." "Better alone than with a man who watches me drown," I said. The elevator doors opened. Damien was standing inside, holding the door for me. He looked at Ethan, then at me. He did not say a word. He just waited. I stepped into the elevator. Ethan took a step forward, but the look in Damien's eyes stopped him cold. "Goodbye, Ethan," I said. The doors slid shut, cutting off the image of my husband standing alone in the hallway, staring at the ring on the bench. We rode down to the lobby in silence. When the doors opened, the lobby was bright with the midday sun. Frank, the security guard, was standing at the desk. When he saw me, he straightened up and tipped his hat. "Good afternoon, Ms. Whitfield," Frank said. "Good afternoon, Frank," I replied. We walked out through the revolving doors and onto the sidewalk. The city noise washed over us. Horns, sirens, the rhythm of life. The sun was blindingly bright, reflecting off the glass towers. It felt like a baptism. My phone buzzed in my hand. I looked down. It was a text from Ethan. "You went too far. You did not have to ruin him. You are cold." I stared at the screen. Too far. That is what people say when you finally stop letting them walk all over you. That is what bullies say when their victims fight back. They call it too far, because they are used to you going nowhere. I did not reply. I did not feel the need to justify myself. I pressed delete. The message vanished. Then I blocked the number. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The driver opened the back door. Damien gestured for me to get in. I slid onto the leather seat. The air conditioning was cool and crisp. Damien slid in beside me. The car pulled away from the curb, merging into the traffic. I watched the Northgate building recede in the rear window. I was leaving the place where I had been a servant, and I would return tomorrow as the master. Damien reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a blue file folder and handed it to me. "What is this?" I asked. "The expansion plan," Damien said. "Northgate is just the beginning. Nora, the Argent pipeline has applications in healthcare, in finance, in government logistics. I do not just want to fix this company. I want to build a network." He looked at me, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the game. "You proved something back there," he said. "You proved you have the stomach for the real work. Most people crumble when the pressure hits. You sharpened your knife." I opened the folder. It was a roadmap for a national rollout. It was ambitious, it was terrifying, and it was exactly what I wanted. "Welcome to the real chess game, Nora," Damien said, a small smile playing on his lips. "You are not asking for permission anymore. You are not asking for a budget. From now on, you set the price." I looked at the documents. I looked at the city passing by outside the window. I felt the engine of the car hum beneath me, powerful and inevitable. I smiled, and this time, it wasn't a polite smile. It was the smile of a woman who knows exactly what she is worth. "Double it," I said, tapping the revenue projection on the first page. Damien laughed. "Excuse me?" "The projection," I said, looking him in the eye. "It is too conservative. If we optimize the edge nodes, we can double the throughput in 6 months, double the revenue." Damien looked at me for a long moment. Then he leaned back, looking satisfied. "Done," he said. "Drive." The car sped up, heading toward the horizon, and I did not look back. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It has been a wild ride with Nora, and I hope you enjoyed seeing justice served as much as I enjoyed writing it. I am curious, where are you tuning in from today? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. And if you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories. Hit that like button and smash the hype button so this story can reach even more people. Your support means the world to me. See you in the next one.